Class is now in session. I am Professor Hockey, and this is the Sharks weekly recap, this time of week 15. The Sharks started off with an important game against a team that defeated them in the Stanley Cup Finals during their first trip ever to that point in the playoffs, the Pittsburgh Penguins. The Sharks played what I felt was their best game of the season up to that point, and they managed to win 5-2 even after they fell behind 1-0 early on in that game. For the rest of it after that point, they controlled, and as I said, their best game of the season. The next day, however, the Sharks had to fly to Arizona and face off against the Coyotes in a game that could possibly look like it was going to end up being a pretty bad one, and that is what ended up happening. The Sharks gave up 2 early goals. Aaron Dell was in nets for this one, and while the Sharks almost managed to claw back into this game, at a point it was 4-3, just a 1-goal deficit. The 2 empty net goals scored consecutively by the Coyotes ended up ending this game by a somewhat ugly score for a game against a team like the Coyotes, 6-3. The Sharks then had their rematch versus the Tampa Bay Lightning. When you're a Western Conference team like the Sharks, you face off against Eastern Conference teams twice in a season, one at home, one on the road, and at home the Sharks managed to deal with the league best Tampa Bay Lightning 5-2, but in this rematch the Sharks were without Erik Karlsson, they were still without Marc-Edouard Vlasic. And while the Sharks performed somewhat admirably in this game, they had an okay game. The Lightning managed to take advantage of a lot of their great opportunities that they did have. They potted 6 goals in this game, and the Sharks lost by a score of, again, 6-3. Offensively for the Sharks, the player leading the way was Evander Kane, as he put up 3 goals, 3 assists, now second on the team in goals with 19, putting for himself 6 points in just 3 games, 2 points a game, and 40 points on the year. That's in 50 games, so he's definitely having a solid pace at this point. Kevin Labanc as well, propped up by a 3-point game against the Coyotes. He had 1 goal, 3 assists for 4 points. That put his point total up to a flat 30. Tomas Hertl with 3 goals, 0 assists for 3 points. All 3 of those goals came in the game against the Penguins. That was a hat trick for him, as well as Brendan Dillon. Probably the first time he will be here, maybe even the last time I will mention him. 0 goals, 3 assists, putting his point total up to 16 with 3 points on the week. Nobody else actually on the Sharks had more than just 2 points this week. Moving on to the news of the week, the first thing is the Sorensen contract. This obviously seems like a bit old news because this contract was announced basically like the moment after I filmed last week's weekly recap, and so this is technically 7 days old, but I just felt like I should still talk about it at least at some point, and this was the perfect time to do it. The Sharks re-signed Sorensen, 2 years, $1.5 million a year, basically exactly what I had predicted he would get. Sorensen, a solid contract for him, definitely a good bottom 6 player. Doesn't seem like someone the Sharks ever want to try on the power play, but he's good on the penalty kill. He could technically play the second line, as he sort of is doing right now with Thornton and Pavelski, and he's a good support player who you could see probably putting up about 30 points in a season. $1.5 million is really 30 points is what the mileage you expect to get out of the player making that amount of money. Next is Karlsson and Vlasic and how it relates to their injuries. So Erik Karlsson seemed to have a bit of trouble at the end of the Penguins game. He didn't play late in that one, he seemed to be dealing with some sort of injury, but apparently he was fine to play against the Coyotes the next day. However, it turns out that it wasn't maybe that fine because he didn't end up suiting up for the game against the Lightning, and it was recently announced that he will not play any game until the All-Star break, so he will miss both the game tonight against the Panthers and the game tomorrow against the Capitals. Hopefully, the 2 weeks that he will have off since the Coyotes game will do him some good and he'll be able to heal, because the Sharks will certainly need him down the stretch. They aren't necessarily in too much danger of, let's say, falling out of a playoff spot, but without Erik Karlsson, the Sharks certainly aren't a contending team like they currently are, and more of like a playoff bubble team without this number 65. As such, Karlsson, they'll hope that he can come back to full strength, or at least very close to full strength. Next is Vlasic, and he's had a bit of an interesting one. He's been day-to-day for a bunch of days now. I think like 8 games in a row he was considered day-to-day ever since he got injured against the Avalanche. He was recently put on IR, like just within the past, like maybe it was yesterday or just a couple of days ago, and now all of a sudden he's a game-time decision and has a pretty good potential of playing tonight against the Panthers. So I don't know what's going on with Vlasic. It's just like the Sharks to keep their injuries basically in a smoke of mystery. But hopefully that Vlasic is back, I guess, for tonight. It wouldn't, it wouldn't be the worst thing if they also rested Vlasic for these last couple of games before the All-Star break. But seeing Vlasic back on the ice and seeing how he performs in his return to the lineup, since he hasn't played again since I believe it was the start of January, could be nice to see. Finally, the 10-day break. The Sharks will be having 10 days off after the game on Tuesday. Their next game, I think, will be the following Saturday, so not the Saturday 4 days later, but the Saturday all the way next week. And so for those 10 days, I will not obviously be able to do game reviews, and so I'm planning on doing, I think, 4 videos about other Sharks-related content. One that will be discussing the trade deadline, who the Sharks could look to move, who the Sharks could look to acquire. Another one will be doing a prospect update video similar to the one I did in about mid-November. Another one will be doing sort of a look back on how the Sharks have gotten to this point in the season and looking ahead to the last 30-ish games of the year. And then a fourth video that I actually haven't really decided on in terms of a topic. So if anyone has a suggestion, I'm open to considering anything. So if you do have one, you can leave a comment. Otherwise, I'll just find something to do about. But it doesn't have to be necessarily Sharks related. If anyone has just an NHL related question, a comment or a suggestion of what a video could be about, that would be fine too. But otherwise, that will do it for this review. Class dismissed.